welcome everyone. So this is another recording today, and we have Steve Speakman here to us today as our second guest. Steve is, do you call yourself a pastor?
Other people call me pastor. Yeah, so I'll go with that.
Yeah, he's a pastor at the metal church in Swansea, which is called Sanctuary Wales. So today we're gonna talk a little bit about him and his faith story and his work with the local metal community there. Tell me a little about yourself and like your faith and your faith journey as you growing up because we know each other, but I don't know like details about
Yeah.
your faith
Um,
journey.
Basically, I was taken to church by my godmother, and when I was probably about 11, I started asking to get baptized, um, and it was probably about the same sort of time as I started preaching. It was one of those situations where our class in Sunday school was going to take the service, and everybody was asked to do something, and I got plonked with preaching.
11
Um,
years old.
yeah,
Oh, that was like you need therapy.
yeah. Well, I was I I don't know. It just sort of came naturally. Um, and by the time I was 15, I was going up to lay preachers meetings where I was the youngest by about 30 years. And we were discussing all this biblical stuff, but hey ho. And I was asked to be an elder in the church at 17, which was unheard of back
Yeah,
then.
it's very unusual. I mean, to be honest, I have mentioned those kind of things to regional leaders,
Mm,
not the current ones, so in case that someone that knows them listens.
yeah,
And just the horror in their eyes, having like 16 and 17 years. It's just like, and my take is like, who's best to know how to reach out teenagers that
yeah,
another teenager?
yeah, yeah. Well, I refused twice because I thought everybody else on the diapnet was a lot older than I was.
Mm.
And I refused twice. And the third time they asked me, I was like, well, if you think that I'm capable of it, then I must be capable of it. And I took on the role and just ran with it. And I was a deacon in that church for 10, 12 years. So it was it was a good role. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I did youth work and various other things.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Glastonbury Festival and on the missionary team. Um, I've done all sorts of weird and wonderful things. It's really when 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 I I I at one point I worked for a bank, and when I was applying for a supervisor's position, they said, "Oh, put down all the different things you've done." So I put down all the different things I've done, and they interviewed me. And at the end of the interview, they said, "We only interviewed you because we couldn't believe all of these things that you've done, and we were going." Basically, their mindset was, "We're going to interview him, prove him to be a liar, and then sack him." And
So they got quite upset by your application.
yeah, yeah, they did, and it turned out I got the job. So there we are.
So you say you've done within your like those your 10 years tenure, you said you've done a lot of like weird and wonderful things. So tell me one, because you got my attention when you say weird. You got my attention straight away.
I've done things like I sat on the when I was in university. I sat on the board for integrating the nurses into the universities, which was called Project 2000, and there were just four of us.
Integrate nurses.
We integrated the nurses into a university setting, and things like there was a writer who wrote a book about Steve Biko, who was he was a counterpart to Nelson Mandela in South Africa, and he got beaten to death. And I I was basically the person who was asked to show him around our university and go to dinner with him, and really got on like a house on fire, and got given his home phone number and address in London to come and see him.
Okay.
And it's just really weird, odd things like that.
It's a bit surreal, isn't it? Like
It is when I look back at it. At the time, I was just like, and when I was in uni, I was sitting on loads of different boards in university. So I was on the board for the Project 2000 thing. I was also on the board for developing the Brentwood Centre, which was developing a centre like no other in the UK at the time.
The 2000 thing was a thing that it was like kind of they have to do with the end of the world or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Or it was like to plant a lot of jets because around
Yeah,
that time well, a lot of different things were going on.
Yeah, and it was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and that's how I see it. But I just it's just weird. It's just I've had loads and loads of really odd experiences that when you put them all together, just come to sum me up, I suppose.
I kind of like I kind of got in. I'm looking at that dude you have in your background, that green guy.
Yeah,
And I know what you do with your job. You run a shop, like you sell a lot of these kind of things from
yeah,
films and like
memorabilia
horror.
and all brass.
And yesterday, like at the time of the recording, it's after one of the live podcasts we did. We touched a little bit about horror, like because I'm like a big horror fan.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've actually been in a horror movie.
Really, which one?
It was called flipping heck. I played a Father Christmas who was a drunk Father Christmas, and I got my head smashed to bits in a car door. I know it's really odd, but I was asked to do a cameo. What was it called? I can't remember what it was called. It was
Like a
good
B
enough
movie or something.
film to be released on DVD and be available in Asda, but it wasn't an A-rated movie. So
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about a little bit about where metal is coming into your faith journey.
I've always been into metal. My first records were my first record was Slade, and the first records that I actually chose for myself was Black Sabbath, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and Rainbow Rising. And to be honest with you, I chose those on the artwork. I just loved the artwork of the albums.
This is
But
what we do as youngsters, isn't it?
yeah,
I remember I had on vinyl. I mean, I don't have the vinyl anymore. I had the first record for Dismember. You know, Dismember is a death
yeah,
metal. They're quite like anti-Christian. That back
yeah,
then I wasn't a Christian, so I kind of love the artwork. I mean, it's a
yeah,
very good job as a look at it as a pure art and take
yeah,
out the imagery. It's a very good job. But then he had like a lot of like some like he had the Madonna with swords
mm,
poking through here, so everywhere. So it was quite an anti-Christian
yeah,
cover. So I was choosing quite a lot of records based on the artwork.
yeah. That's how I started, and
So I started listening to Cannibal Corpse.
yeah, yeah. Well, Cannibal Corpse was a fair way on from Black Sabbath and Rainbow, but
I mean, I was
it's
always like more to the extreme side of metal. I'm still there,
yeah,
and I enjoy extreme metal quite a lot.
yeah. And I'm sort of the same. I enjoy all sorts of metal, from prog to classic rock to extreme metal and screamo. I like it all. Um,
Yeah,
but I, 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 there used to be a real conflict with metal in the church, and growing my hair and what have you. And I remember
so is
I
that during the 80s, I would guess.
yeah, yeah,
So when it was like the metal was the hot topic, isn't it? Like
yeah,
all
yeah,
churches were like,
and the people were being encouraged to take their records out and burn them and everything. So I got really quite annoyed with this one night, and I came home from church and was like, "All right, God, if you don't want me to be involved in this sort of line of music, then I need to know. But I need to know in the morning." Nothing like putting God on the spot. But I said to him, "I need to know in the morning," and I went to bed. And in the morning, I had a phone call from Ask Youth Offenders Prison, and it was a lady who said, she said, "I've been given your number as somebody um, to give me contact details for Christian bands, because we wanna do a 6 month program of bringing Christian bands into the prison." And I said, "Yeah, that's no problem." And so I gave her a load of Christian band phone numbers, and I said to
there
her,
weren't that many back then.
"Yeah, there were
Like
loads.
in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, there were quite a few in the UK, and quite a lot based around Wales. Um, but I gave her phone numbers, and I said to her, "Where did you get my phone number from? Just out of curiosity." And she said, "I don't know." I said, "What do you mean you don't know?" She said, "I came into work this morning, and this note was on my desk. Phone this person for Christian bands." And she said, "I
Ah,
asked around the office where it had come from, and nobody knew." And I've spoken to this
ah,
woman once since, and the once was about 6 months later, and she phoned me up to thank me for giving her the details of these bands, and she said it's been a real eye opener, and the ministry is going well, and they're going to take it on for
that's a
another 6 months.
very that's a powerful moment, isn't it? Did you
Yeah,
realize it that when you were talking on the phone with her? Did you
yeah.
realize that well,
I I
that's
I
your answer?
I basically put the phone down and I was like, "That's my answer." And if anybody ever tells me uh, to burn my records or whatever, I'm just going to tell them, "God has got other ideas for me. You can do what you want, but God has definitely got other ideas," and that's sort of the basis for our ministry.
Cool. That's I mean that's really powerful. Like I got goosebumps basically when you say that. Because it's like like boom, like you couldn't like be more clear, isn't it? Couldn't be more
Yeah,
clear.
yeah, and
That's very
we never
strong.
we never found out where the phone number came from.
Mm.
I've never found out, and that was 30 odd years ago. So
So you spend your years having to defend your
yeah,
taste in music, isn't
even
it?
even up to this year, when we brought some people over from America, or called the Extreme Tour, and we couldn't do it with our church because our church wasn't in
Didn't
a
want to get
structured
involved.
enough position. So I've done it with a friend's church,
Mhm.
and there was a lady down there who asked, and she said, I've always been of the opinion that heavy metal is wrong. She said, I love you as a preacher, but she said, I've always wanted to ask you about the correlation between heavy metal and your ministry, because she said it's always been something that's in conflict with God.
A lot of times there's no if you dig a little bit deeper, there's no much argument onto it, isn't it? Like when we
No,
take it like in obviously if we're gonna look like bands like Mayhem, then okay, like that's
yeah,
pretty obvious.
yeah,
But at the same time, it's like we we have Dave Copeland that is a multi-millionaire and ripping people off, and he calls himself a Christian. So what are we gonna shut our churches because David Copeland's a conman?
yeah.
You know, the same way we're not gonna stop listening to metal because there are like a bunch of satanic and anti-Christian bands. Like,
Yeah. The way that I look at it is, if it affects you and it affects you negatively, don't listen to it. Or
yeah,
similarly, don't watch it,
yeah,
and don't get involved with it. Steer clear of it. But if it doesn't affect you, I had a friend who was a pastor for years, and he was into black metal, and he never ever listened to the words. Not that you can work out the words on most black metal anyway, but he was never bothered about the words. He never looked in the covers for the words. He was just the ambience of the music.
kind of you remind me what Tom Araya was saying. Being like Tom Araya being a Catholic, like a
Yeah,
professed Catholic, and he has always had that attitude that Slayer is business basically, more or
yeah,
less.
yeah,
And we just
and
write music. We live our. I mean, even like Kerry King, a lot of his beliefs are very questionable. He's very controversial personality.
this,
So they kind of left everything outside, and
yeah,
Araya, even like for the Disciples song, he was saying like it's a very good song, and like I don't believe God hates anyone.
no, and the majority of people, I know you've got one or two like Mayhem and Deicide and what have you, who are saying that the guy from Deicide has said that he's not a Satan worshipper anymore. But
Was he a Satanist?
he said that he was, but
I think he was just
I
playing the media. I think it was just
yeah,
the media. Yeah, because
um,
it's definitely like a strong anti-Christian
yeah, but
personality.
the majority of people I find are against organized religion. The majority of people haven't, as such, got anything specific against Christ. And if you talk to people and you basically say what Christ is like without saying his name, they'll say, "Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd like to meet a bloke like that."
yeah,
And then when you introduce his name, they're shocked because they have preconceptions, and most of it is preconceptions. Most of them haven't. These days, the youngsters haven't got any personal sort of influence. It's passed down influences about Christianity, and Well, if I'm honest, we haven't done ourselves any favors. Christians have been the biggest hypocrites around.
Yeah,
But to a certain extent, we're all hypocrites.
yeah.
But
There's something. So it's funny enough because we were discussing this thing yesterday, the podcast, and we were saying like Christians shouldn't be. Sometimes people like call us hypocrites, and we use it. We get defensive. It's like we all like we shouldn't be hypocrites, isn't it? it's, it's,
yeah,
it's a
we
choice.
should,
It's a choice we can make, like not to lie,
yeah,
like, and then you work every day to be less hypocrite,
yeah.
to say less lies. Like
But
it's not like a condition like thrown onto you. It's something that you can work yourself out of it.
yeah, but the thing is, it says in the Bible, we are not to judge. Judging is left up to God, and yet we constantly are judging when we are telling people on the
Yeah,
streets, "You're going to hell."
but
What
this
what
is
what makes
yeah,
us have the authority to do that?
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's we are put here to make disciples of people, and we are not going to make disciples of people by telling them that they're going to hell. Jesus
yeah.
didn't tell anybody outside the church that they were going to hell.
I
If
mean,
you look
if you
at,
think about Jesus, hardly he never spoke about hell, isn't it?
well, the only times that he spoke about hell was twice to the Pharisees, and a couple of times to his own believers, but
But still,
they
again, it
were
wasn't. Yeah,
Christians.
yeah, but yeah. So all his that's. I mean, I don't want to go to like a long conversation about hell. It's not for the. It's not for
No,
the.
that's
It's not
fine.
for the time.
Yeah,
But we can talk about another time. But it's very interesting because that kind of teaching, as you say, that Jesus kept it only for existing believers.
yeah,
He
yeah.
never went to the non-believers to tell them,
No,
"Follow me, otherwise you got." It's Have you seen that meme that says he has that that drawing of Jesus knocking at the door from
yeah.
Revelation, and he says, "Who is it? It's me, Jesus. What do you want? I want to eat with you and protect you from what? From the things I'm gonna do to you if you don't open the door."
Yeah,
It's like a you present me Jesus as more like a mob boss than
yeah,
like I don't want to say it is a savior, but like a lot more than it's just a
yeah,
savior, isn't it?
yeah.
Uh,
It's I don't know. I think we've and in a lot of cases we've been uh, the the gospel has been sold short, and we've sort of given ourselves as Christians a bad name, and that's what I think the majority of the bands rail against.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Let me talk mentioning bands. It's something like I see it quite a lot like in Christian metal groups on Facebook.
Mm.
That quite like a there's a good amount of Christians that they kind of I would say they almost scared to listen non-Christian bands.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they need to know specifically, like all the members, like professing Christian, their song talk about Jesus all the time.
yeah,
Like their theology is like solid according to them. What's a solid theology
yeah.
anyway? But like according to them. So what do you think about that? Like what do you like listening to? I mean, I know pretty much your answer, but like for
Well,
the people that are listening,
I'm
we met a bloodstock, isn't it? Like what?
yeah, yeah. That's fair enough. That says it all. Um, it's I listen to most types of music, but there are certain. I'm a big one for lyrics. I like reading the lyrics and what have you, and there are certain lyrics of certain bands that I can't handle, and I would shy away from those, and it's a matter of we are told to not trip up others up. So I wouldn't. I'm very careful with what I play in the car
Yeah.
to not overly trip other or play anything in the car that was likely to trip other people up. If I'm on my own, I can listen to what I like.
There's plenty of music to listen, isn't it?
Yeah, and I I I listen to all sorts of things right the way across the board.
Yeah.
Not just metal, right the way across the board. But I was brought up with blues and jazz and opera and ballet.
Okay.
So how I ever made it into heavy metal, I never know. But it's just I think heavy metal is an expressive type of music, whereas pop is more party, and pop is more for somebody who just wants to go out and have a good time, whereas metal is for, in a sense, it's got a lot more depth to it, and
It says a lot of.
I'm sure I could.
It's a lot of emotion, isn't it? And I
Yeah,
posted something a few days ago about Chester. His name's always from Linkin Park.
yeah,
Chester, that was what was the song that he does like that 14-second scream?
yeah. Chester Bennington. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, and
yeah.
it was. I mean, there was not. I don't think there were many that could put so much emotion
No,
as
and
did.
a lot of heavy rock and heavy metal is about emotion. It's about real things. It's a lot. I mean, Cannibal Corpse isn't necessarily about real things, but because
I
they
mean,
would be horrifying. But
yeah, well, everything is part of. You listen Cannibal Corpse, and you know, like watching a horror film, isn't it? You
yeah,
listen to Cannibal.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And but there's a lot of emotion and a lot of intensity. My wife always says that you don't generally get any hassle at a metal show because they've all got their emotions and angst and what have you out in the music.
Yeah,
So it's generally a more sort of subdued, happy, and we know that from Bloodstock. I mean, Bloodstock on the outskirts of it. If you're just looking in, it's effectively a black metal festival now. I mean, with a bit of prog and power metal involved, but it looks horrific, and it has that sort of Satan sort of head as the moniker for it. And yet you go there, and you meet the nicest people, and it's a family oriented festival,
yeah,
and as the guy from Evil Scarecrow said a couple of years ago, it's one of the most accepting places to be in the world.
yeah,
And he's right. And I actually did a sermon about his statement about being most accepting. And I said, we as Christians should be the most accepting place in the world to be within the church. But we're not. We're very far from it.
It's funny. I was just feeling now that kind of that recurring themes of how things sticking out with other podcasts we have done. Like we were talking again about acceptance and how much the church has lost and can really learn actually by looking at the metal community.
Yeah.
So all those things we were talking about the metal community, that was like what the church actually should be teaching to the world, not Metalhead. Metalhead should be following through. Instead, now the church at the best plays catch up.
Yeah, it's I don't know. but I think that's all sort of one big circle. I think that the church not being as accepting as it should be is producing more people who are anti the church, and anti organized religion, because it's organized religion is what they see as being not accepting, and yet, as for me, Christ was accepting of everybody. If you read through the Gospels, he was accepting of everybody. He was accepting of the people when he went to the Gerasenes, where he threw the demons out of that guy into the pigs, and the Gerasenes, the people there wouldn't have been Jewish. They would have been whatever. He was accepting of them, and he left the guy there to go and tell his people. He left the woman at the well there to I mean, she was basically an outcast from her own society, and yet he spent a couple of days there with her society and with the Samaritans, who were like the people's or the Jewish people's worst enemies, apart from the Romans. And he even saved a servant of a Roman commander from dying. So Jesus is basically saying, in right the way throughout the Gospels, we've got to be accepting of every type of person that there is, regardless of whether we like them. And he even said we've got to love our enemies. It's easy to love our neighbors and our friends and our family, but we've got to love our enemies, and we've got to love the people that that we don't like, and we've got to love the people that don't like us, which is even more difficult. But we've got to show love to them.
Definitely.
It reminds me of we used to take our memorabilia shop on the road during the summer, and we went to a live role playing event up in Nottingham. And as we were putting the tent up and we put the banner up, and we had a fish and a cross on our banner, and somebody came to my stall and said, there are 4,000 people on site and you're the only Christians. And I was like, and that's supposed to intimidate me, why? But towards the end of the weekend, as we were packing down, there was a couple who were behind our stall, and their daughter had become unwell, and the mum was going around asking people, was there anything that they could give her and what have you. And my wife sort of gave her some yogurts and things to help her with her throat and what have you. And we left then. But the next year when we went back, this couple were in the same place, and they came over to us and said, we remember you, and you were the only people that would help us when our daughter was ill last time. So what do you want us to do? And they became friends of ours, and they helped us put our tent up and everything. And everybody had been really anti us when we got there because we were Christians. But over a couple of years, we ended up with everybody sitting in a semicircle outside our tent, having a glass of wine and what have you. So it's.
You don't have to preach, isn't it? You don't have to preach every time you meet with us.
No, and I think
be with them.
you can preach with your hands and your feet and what you do far more effectively than preaching with your mouth.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I've rambled.
No, don't worry. That's kind of interesting stories. Because I'm cautious of time as well. Like, do you want to start like tell us a little bit about what you do like with Sanctuary and how that came into uh, Freeze. And I would like also to be interesting because Sanctuary is not a UK based ministry. You are the
No,
only Sanctuary in the UK.
yeah,
And I would like to, I would like to tell, I would like to know, are they kind of want to expand and support other metal initiatives,
yeah,
or they kind of
yeah,
so like it would be nice to know if it's like it's if there room for someone maybe listening and thinking of like it would be
yeah,
nice to start a metal church.
yeah.
Um,
Well, Sanctuary International was a ministry started by Pastor Bob Beeman, and you can have a look at he does podcasts every day.
you can find him
Um,
on Facebook. He's a very
yeah,
interesting guy.
yeah, yeah. And we basically how it came about. I knew Pastor Bob from um, we had started a ministry of a youth ministry, and we wanted to call it Sanctuary. And then I went to an event called Meltdown and met Pastor Bob, and his ministry was called Sanctuary as well. So we asked Bob, was it okay for us to use the name Sanctuary and sort of become sort of linked with him? And he said, yeah, it was okay. And he gave us the logo, which we still use. And it started off as a youth group, and we developed up to
So sorry, it was a youth group around metal.
not as such. It started as a general youth group, but then it sort of developed a metal vibe, because I was at the time there were quite a few Christian rock bands and metal bands, so I would bring them down and we would have events in the local town hall. And one time the pastor of the church came across, and I invited him to take part in a Wall of Death, but he wasn't he wasn't too pleased with that.
His faith wasn't strong enough to get in the
No,
wall of death.
but even in those terms, we wanted to put on these events, and we went to the church and said, "Can we borrow the PA to put on this event?" And they said no. So, being nice and resourceful, I went to the local biker gang and said, "You've got a PA. Can we borrow it?" And they said, "Yeah, no problem, as long as we can come into the gigs as well." And so they brought all their kids. So we had 100 and odd teenagers, plus the biker gang, plus the biker gang's kids.
So it was like a Christian metal festival.
Yeah,
Gig, isn't it?
sort of. And this is how it went. And we ended up, we did a big event in our local park with about 12 Christian metal bands, and we had about, I think they said there were over 1,000 people that went through the park on that day.
Yeah, I think what you said, I sometimes would say you need to be present. God opens very strange doors. We have a contact. It's actually there's a local shop here that they sell all like anything from occult stuff to bongs and crack pipes and things that are kind of questionable or
Yeah.
what they're gonna be used for. But they look like very happy for us to put leaflets at the shop. I'm going there a few times to say hi, and we also
Yeah.
organize some Ruach card readings. I don't know if you know them. So they kind of they kind of literally opened the doors for us to do stuff. It's a tiny shop, but kind of
Yeah.
when I recommended to them to do the card readings, it was like, ah, yeah, we have like an office at the back that we don't really use. So it like literally before you walk to, there's like a room at the back called the bonks there.
Mm.
And like literally it was like in the hallway between the main shop and the bonk area. It's like, and then you have me like doing card readings and praying with people. And like
Brilliant.
it's really bizarre, but it's like so beautiful. It's like so
Yeah.
nice. Like you feel like where it's supposed to be. Like with all like crackheads like and doing card readings. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it's
That's
very good.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of morphed into the church that we have now, and we run a church effectively for Misfits and Metalheads. There's most of the people that come to our church are Metalheads, but we've got people who are gay, people who are transgender. We've got a Mormon and a Jehovah's Witness come now and then. We've got all sorts of different people, and we work out of. We've just gone to doing Sunday services every week in a church that we share. And then on Monday nights every other week, we do a church in a well, it's a pub come live music venue, and we do it slightly differently there. As in, I choose a couple of videos to we watch them and then discuss them. And some of the videos I agree with, and some of them I don't. Just to get sort of reactions from people, and
Sometimes
then
it's like
I'll
to do stuff to just start a conversation, isn't it? Not
yeah
so much
yeah
agreeing or not, just like
yeah
let's talk about it.
yeah, and then we have a little 10-minute break, and then I'll do a talk, and I let them ask me what they want to talk about. So next time's talk is on the rapture, and last time's
Controversial.
yeah. What was it on last time? But we've done angels and demons and the Book of Enoch and all sorts of different things. But the interesting thing for me is we've now been working in this sort of pub environment for about 12 years, and each of the pubs or the live music venues that we've been in have had one thing in common, that one of the guys who promotes in the venue started promoting with me. As in, he used to come to our youth club and he wanted to get into promoting. So I said to him, okay, you pick a mainstream band and I'll pick a Christian band, and we'll put them together and we'll promote a couple of shows.
Yeah.
And we did that, and he went on to promoting, and he's making a good living of promoting now. He's actually promoting Fozzy in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah.
But he has massive. He's not a Christian, but he has massive respect for me,
Yeah.
because if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have been able to start developing what he's now developed into.
Yeah.
And he wrote an amazing testimony to what we've done, basically saying if it wasn't for people like you, I and people of this nature wouldn't wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the main thing about church. I think churches should be community based, as in reaching out to the community, doing things for the community.
Just for
And
the sake of doing them, isn't it? Not
yeah,
expecting anything
yeah.
back.
One of the things that we are going to do up in the church is we're going to we've got a couple of guitar players, some Christians, some non-Christians, but they've said that they will give their time to teach kids from the area that our church is in how to play guitar.
Yeah.
And we're slowly buying up second-hand guitars left,
It's
right,
very
and
interesting
centre,
because
so that we've
yeah.
got enough guitars so that when these kids come in, we can do something like that. And that's nothing to do with God as such, but
Yeah.
it's us providing a service for the community, because I think that they've got to see how much you love them before you earn the right to speak to them about God.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean, Jesus spent about 30 years doing that, isn't it?
yeah,
Before he even start like put, put his first sermon out.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody
and
knew him, isn't it? You said like people saying like, is that Jesus, the guy like Mary's
yeah,
son or something?
yeah, and he went to the Pharisees at the beginning and the end of his ministry, and he said, "You were doing it wrong. You're not doing what God's asked you to do. You're doing what man has contrived around this faith. But to me, he went there at the beginning of his ministry and said, "You're doing it wrong, and I'm sort of going to show you how it should be done."
And look
And
what
they took
happened
no
to him.
notice, and he went there, back there again, and said, "You're still not doing it right."
Yeah.
So
You talk too much.
I know I do.
No, I wasn't saying to you. I was saying like the Pharisee said that to Jesus. You talk too much.
Yeah,
Let's kill you.
yeah, yeah. Basically,
Yeah. That's really good. It's like when we kind of nearly the end. Sorry, my phone was going off. Uh, so tell me, it's like for closing, like an interesting story from your metal ministry, from the years of your metal ministry.
um,
I think you share one just before we start recording, so I don't know if you want to expand on that or something else.
I can't remember what I said.
We talk about that drummer at the pub that we're rehearsing at that
Oh,
place.
yeah. We've because we use a live music venue. There are bands who rehearse quite regularly whilst we are doing our service, so to speak. And there was one the drummer of one band who were called the Fiends, and he came down and was saying, what's this all about then? Because my son is one of the sound engineers in the venue, and the Fiends know my son, and he said, we've asked Caleb what you do, and he said it's church. And he said, we come through and there's some really, really weird and wonderful videos that you're showing. And we don't get it at all. So I basically explained to him we're a church for people who don't overly like church or want to be in church. And we are for Misfits and for Metalheads and punks and goths and whoever wants to know about Christ, but doesn't necessarily fit into the church side of things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had a little chat with him, and he was actually brought up a Catholic, but then found out that he was gay, so was ostracized from the Catholic religion. And I said, well, we accept anybody. And he said, yeah, but surely there are strings attached. And I was like, no, we accept anybody. Anybody who doesn't overly fit into church, doesn't necessarily like going to church, or church doesn't like them, because we've got some people who church didn't like them. We'll listen to. And I said, you can come and never be a Christian, and you can just come and join in the debates. I said the only thing that I ask is that when you come in, your friends, and when you go out, your friends, and what happens during the debate is something for you to think about. But we all leave as friends, and it's just a matter of it builds up a community. And he said that sounds really cool. He said,
and the whole thing you do is so simple, isn't it?
I think so.
It doesn't need any budget. It's just literally your pocket money to buy a drink, isn't it?
Yeah, and
a Bible.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and we do things on an absolute shoestring because there's no one funding us. We are allowed to use the church for free. We are allowed to use the venue for free, and we've been basically blessed by every venue that we've had for the last 12 or 13 years. They've given it to us for free, and they haven't been Christians giving it. They've been non-Christians.
That's the most amazing thing, isn't it? That you see God opening doors.
Yeah.
And with people, the most unlikely people that we expect to support you, isn't it?
Yeah. There was one guy. Over about 5 years, there was one guy regularly used to be working the bar, and he used to work the bar in one venue, and then we moved venues, and he worked the bar in another venue. And I was in the pub on my own with him one day, and I said, "How come you always draw the short straw and work the bar when we're here?" And he said, "Because I request these shifts." And I said, "Why?" I said, "You're not a Christian," because I knew that he told me he wasn't a Christian. Yeah. A Christian. And he said, "I just like the atmosphere, and I like the way that you put things over." And he said, it seems like a sensible way to live my life, by these sort of ways that you put things over.
Yeah, yeah.
And I up until that point, I'd always said, even if we meet in just for the barman.
Yeah.
And it basically worked out like that for 5 or 6 years. We were meeting there, and we grow and shrink, and I never know how many people are going to be there. There could be 8 to 10 of us. There could be 25 to 35 of us.
Yeah.
Because we and it's just weird, but I just go with the flow, and basically we are establishing a community, and a community that is solid and who know each other and will stand out for each other as well. regardless of
especially.
whether they're a Christian or not. We've got a girl who comes
Yeah.
to our church, and she's been coming for about 18 months, and she doesn't believe in God. She believes in crystals and things.
She
So
doesn't know
why
it yet.
she comes, I don't know. But
She's always saying
she,
she's a Christian, she doesn't know it yet.
yeah, yeah. But she'll tell you she's not a Christian. She doesn't believe in God. She believes in crystals and things. But she's been coming for about 18 months to our church
But
every
even
week.
those people that believe, like, I don't know how to call it, alternative spiritualities, I don't know, like
Yeah.
crystals. And I mean, because I have quite a few friends that they, quite close friends that they into those kind of stuff, like angels and clairvoyance and crystals.
Mm.
Like, and I always like want to understand, in a way of, in a twisted way of knowing your enemy. Like I
Yeah.
don't, they're not my enemies, of course, but it's kind of like if I want to build up an argument against something you believe, I need to know why and how you believe it, first of all.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of like, sometimes there's not much to say. Like, it's, or, you know, they kind of live a Christian life without calling themselves Christians, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's strange. We get all sorts of um, different people like that, and we get people who've walked away from church years ago because of things that church has done,
yeah, yeah.
and really hurt them badly, and
Mm.
and they'll just walk in.
I don't know if I mentioned it during a recording or before we started recording, but I'll say it anyway, just in case. That we see and we hear like a lot of times, like, especially as we also got involved with leadership, that, people are not interested in Christianity or religion anymore, and, we're becoming too secular and no one cares about Sunday. So that, then actually, like, you're looking at the wrong place, mate, isn't it? Like,
Mm.
the God's spirit is never stop moving, and that it's
No.
moving in parts that the organized church radars cannot pick because they're looking too high up.
Yeah.
And under the radar, the Holy Spirit that does an amazing job. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, for closure, if because there are like people in churches, they say, "Oh, look, I would be nice to have a metal church,"
Mm.
but they never like kind of imagine of having, like, the kind of that stays on their imagination. Like, what do
Yeah.
you say? Go start one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just get together with a couple of mates and start using um, metal metal songs as ministry songs. We use Tithemi by Sleeping Giant quite often, and Fearless by For Today. Fearless is has sort of become a banner for our ministry,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's a matter of being fearless and walking out into the blackness, knowing that you are light in that world.
yeah.
And
I say,
and
I really thank you for coming,
no,
doing this
it's
with
been an
us,
absolute blessing.
and it kind of gets a lot of help on the new things we start doing and kind of rebooting our ministry here in
Yeah,
Kent. Uh,
and anything that I can ever help with, just give me a shout.
yeah, I'll pick your brains after we stop recording for a few minutes before we closing, Justin. So yeah, so we're gonna have some in the future. We have some interesting guests that Steve actually has will bring us in touch. But in the meantime, leave some comments. Any thoughts if you haven't done already, because basically it's a recording. So I will be probably watching with you from my own home. But in the meantime, Take care. Be blessed, everyone. Goodbye.